Ashim Sharma, who's our moderator. Over to you, Ashim. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Aggarwal, for that for setting the tone for the session and also touching upon the salient features NGVs. I would like to thank Vicky for organizing such a topical webinar, also in the midst of the COVID crisis, when various fuel options, various mobility evolutions are being talked about. I think it's very pertinent to also be talking about NGVs, which have, for a very long period of time, sort of set off a silent revolution in the Indian mobility ecosystem. So today, as Dr. Aggarwal just introduced, we have a very august panel with us to discuss about natural gas as a transportation fuel, paving the way for NGV growth. So during the course of the discussion, we will try to touch upon various imperatives for growth of NGVs, covering vehicles, availability of fuel, whether it's through the pipeline infrastructure, CGDs, or the stations, as well as fuel pricing. What are the steps that have been taken so far, and what additional steps need to be taken in this direction? We also see that some regions in the country have had a lot of success with regard to NGV, for example, the cities of Delhi and Mumbai, and we will see what lessons can be drawn out of those for replicating this model across the country. Also, how the success of CNG can be translated to LNG for heavy trucking. We'll also look at the implications of the recent fuel pricing on NGV growth, including things like the India Gas Exchange that has been set up. Also, implications of recent policy announcements. For example, now an LNG station can be set up anywhere, thanks to the recent guidelines issued by PNGRB, irrespective of who controls the particular GA, so how that could pave a path for LNG growth. Also, the customer mindset is very important in adopting any means of transportation, and there how the increasing proliferation of NGV models in the lineup of OEMs is leading to a positive outlook for NGVs, and also how recent announcements in that space could further this movement. We'll also touch a little bit about the application of LNG in marine. And finally, to the oft-quoted question of CNG versus EV, is CNG a transitionary fuel, and what happens when EVs come in, and also what happens once fuel cells come in. We'll try to touch upon these aspects in the course of our discussion today. So to begin with, I think let me call upon Dr. Malhotra from GAIL with a question, essentially because sort of the trunk pipeline forms the very foundation on which the NGV growth in the country can take place. So Dr. Malhotra.
555 CNG stations. Even though there are complaints regarding the queue, though it has come down, but still certain stations are there. We even selling less than even 500 kgs also. So is that the exact locations where the more population of vehicles are there? Do I get this for setting up any CNG stations? If the lands are available, then only we can set up the plots. The congested city, it is very difficult. As you are asking that, what are the lessons can be shared with the other CGD sector? Since the way, if you see this way, Mr. Mathur was saying that the pipeline now it is availability in the pan India. Earlier, if you see that 70% pipeline were there only in the western part and northern part of the country, and the balance 20% was in the south, and few were there in the northeast, basically. Now, you see, after this Urja Ganga, Prime Minister pipeline going to the eastern part, and then it is getting extended to towards your northeast. Indradhanush, they are laying the line to up to Guwahati, and if you go to the southern part, after setting up this Enron LNG terminal, the gas is available in pan India now. So if the gas is available pan India and the domestic gas is allocated for this particular sector, then it's a question of creating the infrastructures. The entity and 46 entity, they have taken the authorizations for setting up around 20,000 CNG stations are going to be 10,000 CNG stations going to be out there by 2027. And
Right.
if they are not setting up, there's a huge penalties are also there on them. Say 20 lakhs per station per year cumulative penalty would be there. So they are the entities, they cannot afford to not to create any infrastructure. So infrastructure would be there from one side. And the second side, you see the manufacturer. There's a three basically triangle is there. The infrastructure provider, the availability of gas, and the manufacturer. Now, manufacturer, if you see that, the Maruti is taking a very lead role for creating, for manufacturing maximum variant CNG vehicles, and followed by even the Skoda has come. We had a discussion with even new the manufacturer Kia had come. We have a discussion with them also if they can also come. So we are talking with the all manufacturers. Tata is there, Eicher is there, and Ashok Leland also we have discussed with them, not only for NGV as well as for the LNG also, if they can
Right.
manufacturing the buses. So now, ecosystem is getting developed, and
Sure.
there is no reason not to get this particular NGV spreaded all over the India, basically. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Thank you. So I think clearly spelled out that triangle of stakeholders that is now working towards making this happen in the other parts of the country as well. Still on sort of a similar thread and where pricing also stays important. And that's my question first to Mr. Joshi, and then after that, Mr. Vadla, you can also comment on that. So we are seeing an inverted pricing right now in the sense that the spot prices are lower, and some stars might have got into longer term contracts which are higher priced. Also, in some cases, maybe the domestic pricing is probably higher than the kind of spot pricing of LNG that is available today. So, how is this inverted pricing structure sort of panning out for NGV and for you as the industry? So, I would like to hear your perspective on that, Mr. Joshi, and after that, also Mr. Wadhwa. Mr. Joshi, are you there?
You're on mute. Mr. Joshi, you're on mute.
No, I'm not. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, very well hear you, Mr. Joshi.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Sharma, for this question. And thanks to Fiki for organizing this conference and also the participants who are joining in. Now, coming to your question on pricing, pricing is a dynamic situation. We have seen that there have been times when spot prices like this time are lower than long-term prices. There have been times when long-term prices have been lower than spot. The domestic gas prices, again, are a function of, there is a different matter altogether because the way they are calculated is a totally different. And the current very low spot prices is perhaps an aberration. But a country like India needs to follow consistent policies. We cannot make policies and plans based upon phenomenon which are arising because of transient times. And I take this COVID crisis to be representative of a transient time. So as far as if you see on the stability point of view, the thing is to recognize that LNG prices are going to remain competitive for quite some time. It's not just an immediate phenomenon. This will remain for some time. And if you also compare on the basis of alternate fuel, for example, when you are comparing with diesel, which we are again importing, or any other, because basically we are 20% or less than that sufficient in crude oil. So the question is that it makes sense to invest in gas and in the gas infrastructure on a long-term basis. Yes, there would be some distortions being caused by the domestic gas becoming cheaper at a particular point of time. But the long-term story is that for a country like India, we need to follow a consistent policy of continuing to invest in natural gas as a fuel to substitute liquid to large extent. And because the advantages are obvious, what was spoken in the beginning about the lower carbon profile, other advantages which we have not yet tried is LNG. LNG has even more advantage in addition to advantage over CNG, that it can fetch you larger range. And in fact, an LNG truck can as against around 500 kilometers for a diesel waste truck, and LNG truck can do 800 kilometers. It's just a matter of setting up. It's just a matter of setting up the infrastructure for these trucks to ply, and we can see the benefits. And every year, I think India adds up around 7.5 lakh trucks and maybe around 2 lakh buses every year. So if among this new fleet, if we can push a certain percentage on running on LNG after creating transportation corridors, and on that now some beginning is taking place. Petronet is working along with Gujarat Gas, the SPC group company, Gujarat Gas, and even elsewhere between Delhi and Ahmedabad and these corridors. So we can see significant amount of saving on not only on the diesel part, but also on the long-term basis, we can have a cleaner option.
Understood.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure, understood. So, Mr. Vadla, do you share a similar view on this, or something different from your perspective?
Yeah, good morning, all panelists and participants, and thank you to Vicky for inviting me on this important panel discussion. I do endorse the views which have been said earlier by the speakers, and I would like to stress that the LNG pricing is going to stay soft for a longer period of time, and it is a good opportunity that we increase the penetration of natural gas in the country among all sectors, including the transport sector. As we know that today the city gas distribution sector is virtually the second largest gas consumer in the country after the fertilizer sector. And a large part of the volume has of course been allocated by the Government of India through the APM route for two sub-segments of this sector, which is the transport and households. It is also pertinent to note that, as Mr. Jana had explained earlier, that the kind of commitments which have been made for the 9th and 10th round, they are humongous. And if I were to take very, I would say, conservative numbers for conversion, then we would require almost 60 MMSCMD of natural gas additional in the CGD sector in the next 6 to 7 years. And we should also realize that it may not be possible to have all the gas coming from the APM route. So yes, this benign pricing advantage should be taken, and the penetration through the virtual route should also be met. As we heard earlier that we are having the new pipelines coming up across the country. We have talked about the Indradhanush, we have talked about Urja Ganga, as also Delhi, Kochi, Bangalore. But we have also to be conscious of the fact that large parts of the country remain unconnected, and it is a virtual pipeline, which is a LNG route, which can perhaps give the next fillip to the use of natural gas in vehicles. And to that extent, as Ashim, you mentioned about PNGRB's new guidelines or regulation, which allows use of setting up of LNG dispensing in any of the geographical areas, whether it has been awarded to anybody or not. So this is a welcome step, and I believe in the right direction.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vadla. On your last point, I'll come back to you later also in the discussion on LNG and how it can be used for trucking. But I think this is a very opportune time to also take the perspective from Dr. Malhotra. Fortunately, his connectivity is also sorted out right now. So, Dr. Malhotra, we're seeing that there is also a record low price of crude that is prevalent right now. So first and foremost, is India planning to hike up the kind of strategic reserve being built? And second, because of the large tax revenues that are coming on account of this phenomenon right now, is it also going to sort of shift the focus a little bit away from natural gas, especially when it comes to LNG for use in trucks?
See,
Dr. Malhotra, if you could hear my question. Yes.
Your question about this low oil prices. In any case, the Brent is now around $42, $43. So you cannot say we are not in the range of $20 as we had during the initial phase of COVID-19. So that phase is gone.
Right.
And most of the projections say that the oil prices will bounce back faster than the gas prices. So gas prices are here to stay attractive on a long-term basis, as various projections have been made around that. So we hope there is a strong case for pushing gas, and the government of India, which already made a policy, and all the desire has been there to push it to 15% by 2030, the gas share in the total energy mix. So if that is so, I don't think once the economy revives, the government will be too much worried about the additional revenue which you are talking from the petroleum and oil side. So I think that gas is here to stay, particularly in a post-COVID scenario, which I personally feel is that people are now used to see cleaner air, and clear skies, etc. So natural gas as a compared to other liquid fuels is certainly cleaner, and once we have signed the INDC targets, etc., under COP 921, there also, the natural gas is bound to play a role. This is going to be one of the enabling factor for meeting the INDC targets. Having said that, I personally feel that gas need to be pushed, and gas will be pushed by the government policies. Some of the policies, as have been talked by Mr. Pankaj Vadla, said that LNG stations have been allowed. I think there have been some policy interventions during last 5 years, 4 5 years. Then MOPNG first decided LNG as an auto fuel, because Pankaj also said that you cannot be having gas, although Urja Ganga and so many other gas grids are being made, but you cannot have gas reaching every corner and corner of the country. So LNG is one of the viable solution. And for long, haul trucks, etc., LNG is going to be a good solution. So good that MOPNG in 2016 decided that and declared this LNG as an auto fuel. Then in the CMVR rules by the Ministry of Road Transport Highway in 2017, they also recognized this as a fuel. Gas cylinder rules have been framed in 2018. Static and mobile pressure vessels rules in 1981. 1981 rules were amended to accommodate that. And finally, the PNGRB, the regulation to allow LNG stations anywhere, irrespective of whether you have GS for that area or not. So I think these are some of the important enabling factors which will allow LNG also to come as a transport fuel in a big way. And I'm aware that this Petronet LNG is planning big in that direction, and others will certainly follow. Some of the things which still are required in the policy side. Do you want me to address that right now, or maybe later? But I thought let me now straight away give you the some of the wish list from the policy side, which as our federation has, is that MORTH need to allow, the trucks are allowed for 10 years, diesel trucks. Now, all CNG and LNG should be allowed for plus 5 years. Now, if somebody is converting his vehicle from diesel to LNG truck, he should be allowed additional 5 years. So that's what we thought. And then, the most important factor which I forgot and we should not forget is about the gas coming under GST. Now, if we have to have natural gas as a transportation fuel, and the gas overall to succeed in this country, the natural gas has to be brought under GST. We have been talking to government in various forums, and they say that yes, we are working towards it, but somehow, it was about to come. Then this COVID happened. The revenues of GST fell. The government has always been, we are going to do it, and somehow it is not happening. So. Last time also I talked to, last month only I talked to Petroleum Secretary. He was saying that yes, we are in favor of it, but now Finance Ministry has to take a call. When they will take a call, it's up to them because they have to see so many things. So this is one major issue, and then I also feel that government should declare some of the corridors as green corridors. So that you can have LNG fleets going through that. Maybe in future the hydrogen fuel cells that can be that piggyback. No, hydrogen can also piggyback on the natural gas infrastructure. So infrastructure status should be given to all these gas stations, etc. Roadmap should be prepared, and FAME policy like the incentives being given for electric vehicles. Why not for LNG also? Why not for CNG also? So I think these are some of the policy interventions which government need to consider. And I see a lot of good future for gas, and particularly CNG has already been a success story in Delhi. It can always be replicated in other cities also where new GS have been given. And LNG has also a great future. provided we can build up over that, and then auto industry people are also around. If they confirm
Right.
that we can build up vehicles around, and vehicles can be made available, I think environment-friendly fuel should be encouraged, and it will be encouraged because people are now getting used to clean air. That is what they will ask for, and the climate change issues will also push us to reduce carbon in the fuel. Next
Understand.
stage, of course, will be hydrogen, but before we go there, I think we have to go to CH4 and then make it knock off that C also to have pure hydrogen.
H4, yeah, definitely. Sure. Thank you, Dr. Malhotra, for sharing your perspective and also summing up the imperatives that are required. And I think now we've touched upon the supply side, we've touched upon the pricing side, so it's very apt to now move on to the vehicle side. And there, I would like to bring in Mr. S.K. Aggarwal from Tata Motors. So it's a well-known fact that the pricing of an LNG truck is about 40% more than a conventional diesel truck. And that's largely on account of the cryogenic cylinders which need to be imported. Here again, it's more of a chicken and egg. They say the volumes come, the localization will happen. And once the localization happens, the pricing will go down. And that's when a real takeoff could happen. So what is your perspective on it, given that Tata Motors has already developed an LNG bus as well? And if you could share some of your views on this, as well as from a company perspective, how do you see energy vehicles coming into the country?
Thank you, Asim, for the question. First of all, I should thank Vicky for inviting me as a speaker in this COVID times and putting on such an important subject onto the table. And our earlier speakers, whatever they have said is very, very important. Dr. Malhotra spoke about the government policies, number of years the vehicle should be on road. Mr. Joshi and Mr. Vadla spoke on pricing, which is very relevant. And then Mr. Jana spoke about the infrastructure being created, and Mr. Mathur also giving us a feel around that. As an OEM, CNG definitely for the city operations has been the fuel, and from Tata Motors side and other OEMs also have placed their vehicles onto the road, and they were there in BS3 version, BS4, and now in BS6 also. And if I look into the commercial vehicle industry, split into 3-4 verticals. By small commercial vehicles, CNG is very popular in many of the cities where this fuel is available. If I look at the city buses, it has become Delhi is definitely a success story, but many other cities have adopted, and the balance are planning to adopt it based on the availability of the infrastructure. Intercity buses, very little has been taken ahead on this because of the availability of the fuel between the two interconnecting cities and the distance between them. However, a small participation is there. If I look at into intermediate and light commercial vehicles from 4 ton to 12 ton, there also the CNG vehicles are making ground, and a success story is there. Another element is on the medium and heavy commercial vehicles, which I also represent from Tata Motors side. That is from 19 tonner to a 55-ton tractor gross vehicle weight. These vehicles ply across length and breadth of the country. And there is no dedicated route for a particular vehicle. Today it is on north to south, tomorrow it will be south to west or east. So a fuel availability, if it is not there in major part of the country, and I'm referring to a fuel on CNG first, it becomes a challenge for the operator. And people are not worried about the initial acquisition cost. But the CNG pricing has been lower over a period of time, except I remember 1 year when this pricing was equivalent to a diesel price. And during those times, the operator was finding it very difficult to really do that because some of the maintenance costs are higher. Otherwise, it has been always a profitable fuel. No operator is really worried about the initial acquisition cost, long-term cost, and they do a costing for 5 years and look at it. And all the commercial vehicles, people talk about the total cost of ownership. That's the key for them while buying a truck or a commercial vehicle, buses, etc. And we know that within the total cost of ownership, 40 to 50% of the cost of the fuel. So any reduction there is always an advantageous in the long term, which comes in. And CNG becomes very, very relevant, but only up to intermediate commercial vehicle up to 12 tonner or a 14 tonner gross vehicle weight. Because CNG also takes away the payload from the vehicle. That is one disadvantage. The second is availability for the long distance travel, which is there. One good part which I look through CNG is nobody can adulterate the fuel. In diesel, we do see instances, naphtha being added, the kerosene being added. It does damage the fuel injection system also. And there may be some short-term advantage to the driver, which is there. Owners do not promote any such things. But in the long run, they damage the fuel injection system. I look at it as a fuel CNG up to a intermediate commercial vehicle. Coming to LNG, yes, LNG is a good fuel, and I think one of our earlier speakers spoke about taking the range to 800 kilometers, and I think it was Mr. Jana, if I recall correctly, and that is very right. And Tata Motors did take a lead. And hello, am I audible still? Hello, am I audible still?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, okay. So Tata Motors had taken the lead and created the first tractor by importing some of the aggregates from Korea and displaying in Auto Expo some 6 years before. Subsequent to that, Mr. Vadla, who was the key when he was in the Petronet LNG organization, we did create two buses, did supply them to Petronet, but only for their township running. Beyond that, I'm not very sure when the infrastructure is available. And Asim Yusuf rightly said, it is an egg and chicken story. What should come first? Should there be a stations first? Should there be a vehicle first? Or should there be an end customer first? I think we are all into that chain, that who should take the first lead. And I think as Tata Motors OEM, we have taken that first step and we are keen to take it ahead, but probably watching by when the infrastructure will be available in the country for us to ensure that the vehicles can be taken ahead, design can be done, and can be sold to operators, and which make viability for Tata Motors as an OEM and also to the operators in the long run. Over to you, Asim.
Ashin, you there? Just a quick moment, please. We're trying to get Ashin back in the meantime. Dr. Can you please unmute yourself and give us your perspective in terms of how ARI as an organization is looking at previous certification when it comes to NGV? Please unmute yourself, Dr. Tipsy.
Yeah, sorry, I had a connection issue in between. Sorry about it. Yeah, sorry. So thank you, Mr. Aggarwal. I heard you almost till the end of that, and then there was a connection issue. Dr. Thipse, I had a question for you, following on from the thread. So BS6, we've also entered the era of sort of clean diesel, right? So especially as far as particulate matter is concerned, which used to be, the key factor that people used to say is, which is damaging for the lungs, which causes all the winter fog and all of those things. So now how does CNG stack up vis-a-vis, say, a clean diesel in BS6? And Yeah, and especially when it comes to also LNG for trucks, is somewhere the attractiveness going down on account of this? That's one part. And the second is, the next level of pollution that we're going to also talk about is sound pollution. And there probably LNG has some distinct advantages. So given your extensive experience on the powertrain side, what would be your perspective on this?
Yeah. So thank you, Ashim, for giving me the opportunity to talk here. Also, Vicky, I'm very much thankful for sharing this esteemed panel. At the outset, I'll begin with this that as a representative of ARAI, we are being the primary certification agency of India. So we are at ARAI equipped to certify all kinds of vehicles. That gives us a kind of experience with all different kinds of vehicle technologies. And also we work closely with the ministry for framing guidelines. So if we see that the policy, if you see for natural gas vehicles in India right now, it is moving towards CNG concentration in the cities, LNG along highways, and bio-CNG along the rural areas. So that is the, I can say, 3-point agenda of the government of India. And accordingly, rules and regulations have been framed. And now even hydrogen-related activities have started. So I'm happy to say that just 2 days ago, a notification for hydrogen CNG was also released by the ministry, which is also going to open up a new sector for the CNG as such. Now, coming back to your question, BS6, diesel versus CNG. So if you see, to meet BS6, a diesel engine will require a lot of, so it will require a diesel oxidation catalyst, a diesel particulate filter, a selective catalytic reduction device, SCR for NOx. So there are so many after treatment devices required for diesel to meet BS6. And that is in addition to the low sulfur diesel, which is already being provided. So we need the low sulfur diesel plus a train of after treatment. Then yes, diesel can meet BS6. But what that does to the cost of the vehicle is that the cost of the vehicle is driven up by the after treatment costs. And that is in fact a negative point. Whereas in CNG, being a cleaner fuel, it is definitely meeting BS6 with only one 3-way catalyst. In fact, we have done this several times. In the recent few months ago, we have completed 3 to 4 BS6 CNG projects. And with simple one 3-way catalyst, and in some cases, a little bit of EGR, we can do with BS6. So there is no need of any costly after treatment required. So in fact, the economics works in favor of. Another point we should understand that when we put such costly and difficult to maintain after treatment on vehicles such as trucks and buses, you know that the maintenance of these vehicles in the field is an issue. So how do we expect that the after treatment devices will be maintained in the field? Will they be maintained? And again, the maintenance cost, its duration is all going to increase. Further, if we consider technology like SCR, where you need a urea solution, so whether that urea solution will be available, somebody talked about adulteration. Will there be adulteration in that? And the cost of filling the urea, having a urea sensor, a urea tank, so many things are there which actually are not in favor of diesel. So in the light duty segment, you can see, in fact, Maruti has will stop production. So even the heavy duty segment, diesel will continue to dominate for a certain period, but it's important come down. And LNG, in the fact, is one such fuel which is going to tackle the diesel in the heavy duty sector. I feel that LNG will grow in a bigger way, especially when the availability improves along the highways. It will definitely take over that. So to answer your question for BS6, I don't see any disadvantage for CNG. In fact, CNG is doing very well. And I'll give an example of our own city, Pune city. So right. Pune city, we have a public municipal transport system, PML, wherein earlier, maybe 5 years ago, the fleet was almost 100% diesel. And now, last few years, they have been inducting CNG buses. And now the situation is such that around 80% of the fleet is CNG vehicles. And they have like 5% electric buses which have just been brought in. And remaining are diesel buses, which also will be phased out very soon. So maintenance wise also, although there were some troubles with CNG vehicles earlier, now they have matured enough and OEMs are giving excellent support. They have also matured and their support has improved. So CNG is doing very well. So I don't see any per se threat to CNG as far as BS6 is concerned. So
All
that
right.
is the first question. I missed your second question.
No, it was, that with the coming in of clean diesel, is CNG going to be, becoming, and NGV becoming, and LNG becoming less attractive? That was the question. I think on the private part, you've already explained that it's
Yes.
still, actually, the attractiveness goes up. Yeah, understood. So I think that's great. So with Dr. Thipse's perspective and Mr. Aggarwal's perspective, I think the vehicle side is sorted. So that brings me back to Mr. Vadla. Mr. Vadla, there has been talks about setting up an LNG corridor in India, and you just touched upon that also in your answer some time back. So what is it that has been stopping it for so many years now? There has been talk of setting it up on the arterial highways of India so that the trucks that are plying, say, Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, Chennai, they can run on LNG. But somehow things haven't taken off on the ground. So in your opinion, what is it that's stopping this from happening for a fairly long time now?
Thanks for the question, Ashim. Well, nothing will stop it now after the relevant regulatory clearances, as Dr. Malhotra also mentioned. So there were some interpretation issues as to whether it falls within the CGD GA owners, which has very recently been resolved. In fact, there was a further clarification by PNGRB just yesterday, wherein it talked about LNG dispensing. But I would also like to make a couple of points, and thanks to Dr. Tipse and Mr. Aggarwal, because I have had a chance to work with both of them very closely to develop this LNG into the heavy duty transport vehicle. So there is undoubtedly a merit in saying that LNG is going to be the fuel for the heavy duty segment. Let me hasten to assure that there is no competition because it's a different class of vehicles which CNG is able to tackle. LNG is a BIS ready fuel, which has been mentioned earlier also. So meaning thereby that the extra cost which comes in the after treatment equipment which has to be installed on the vehicles which will be using BS6 fuel is very, very high. And to this, I would also like to tell you, Ashim, that you had mentioned about the LNG vehicle cost being higher than the conventional vehicle. So maybe Mr. Aggarwal can chip in here, but I believe the cost of an LNG vehicle now should be almost at par with the conventional diesel vehicle, which will run on a BS6 fuel. Coming specifically now to your query on what will happen. So as we understand, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas is working on setting up LNG stations along the highways. So a draft scheme for Golden Quadrilateral as also a Blue Corridor has been established now. And various participants, including my own company, ThinkGas, we are in the process of identifying suitable opportunities to invest in the infrastructure. In fact, at ThinkGas in our GA in Bhopal, we will soon be commissioning the first LCNG station, which has started now the downtime or the countdown towards the commissioning activities.
Okay.
And we will have provision for many, many unique things in this station, which will be the first of its kind in the country, which will be acting as a virtual CGS. So maybe as Dr. Malhotra also endorsed my view earlier, that the virtual pipeline is something which will now be the thing of the future, and we will have more penetration coming of such stations. Certainly, this requires a lot of support from people like Dr. Tipse, although he has been supportive on this. But the Automotive Research Association of India, which he represents, will have to now start quickly approving the vehicles which have approached for conversion from the conventional system to LNG. So till the OEMs like Tata Motors, they find a good business opportunity to run it on a commercial scale, what will happen is that the existing vehicles, the conventional vehicles, they will be now converting to LNG, and the steps have already been started. So I believe this is the time which will now see more penetration of LNG into the heavy duty segment. And we certainly will be able to make good use of the pricing differential which exists with the alternative fuels.
Understood. So I think so you're clearly saying that it's more or less the time now that we start entering into the gas age as far as trucking is concerned, especially thanks to the recent PNGRB announcements and things like that. There, I think, Mr. Joshi, I'll also take your perspective on one thing that Mr. Aggarwal was saying. That is a bit of a chicken and egg also that, are the vehicles there with the manufacturers and then you set up the stations and the manufacturers sort of seeing are the stations there and then we invest in making a vehicle. So from your perspective, from your firm's perspective, are you willing to go in and make the stations and then, use that as a means to get manufacturers to make the vehicles to come and get refilled at those stations. So, Mr. Joshi, your take on that?
I'm not the right person to answer this question because my company is an LNG terminal company. But my group company, Gujarat Gas, which is which is in the city gas distribution business, and they are in fact already partnering, as I mentioned in course of my initial remarks, Petronet in an initiative in which 5 LNG based stations will be set up within the state of Gujarat. But purely from a free market perspective, I believe that it is the job of the LNG or the CGD network company to set up the stations. And as far as the vehicle part of the business is concerned, that should be left to the vehicle manufacturers because they have the competence in that area. Because that is the way in which we will be able to develop the market. Because there is no point in companies like whether it is Gujarat Gas or whether it is Petronet or whether it is Thing Gas, because these companies have competencies in the natural gas or LNG side of the chain, and the competencies of the on the vehicular are with the companies like Tata Motors, and of course both have to work together. But the company which is better equipped to handle the task, that should take up the task. Even though not a question directed to me, but in course of today's discussions, we heard the word hydrogen several times. That, of course, that is the ultimate aim for a carbon-free economy, where we totally eliminate carbon. But I have a point of view here, and this is an interesting conversation which I am sharing. I was having a chat on this subject with my friend Eric Eblin of Total. He was earlier with Gaz de France and he was on the board of Petronet. So he knows India well. He stayed here for 5 years. And the point which he made was very relevant because he knows the Indian gas and LNG market very well. He said, well, Anil, you have invested as a country in LNG terminals significantly, because if you now know, Dabhol is there, Chhara is there, Mundra has come up, Ennore is there, and then Dhamra is coming up, and plus new projects also are coming up. And as of today also, the country has good LNG terminal capacity available. So purely from India's interest, it is important that we take advantage of the low LNG prices, which are going to stay there for some time, which we both agreed. Pankaj also said the same thing, and invest more in the LNG stroke natural gas vehicle market. Hydrogen today is not a tested fuel. Yes, its time will come, but that is still maybe 15 years or maybe even further away. So at this moment, let us be consistent with our policy approach and push natural gas and LNG in a combination as a fuel to meet our basically global warming, or whether it is the environment goals. And let's wait. We should first go through the intermediate step before jumping to the ultimate. Yes, renewables will be the ultimate solution, but there are still some time left for that.
Sure, Mr. Joshi, thanks for the last part. I'll come to also Dr. Thipse and Mr. Aggarwal on that, on how EV and then finally into FCEV, that sort of thing is coming. So the perspective you shared will be quite useful at that stage. But before that, just a question also for Mr. Jana on the same line of thought that I was pursuing earlier. We understand that, for the GAs of Delhi and Mumbai, exclusivity will end soon. And that's when, competition will also come in. And therefore, at that stage, what are some of the things that could be done for retaining customers? And could LNG stations be a part of that strategy? Or would, say, virtual piping areas surrounding those vias be part of that strategy. So, Mr. Jana, your perspective that would be very valuable.
Sir, if you can unmute.
Yeah. Before I answer this question, you see, what I see that around 3 or 4 government departments are working towards one goal, that environment should be clean. Okay. One pocket is working only for the CNG, then CVG, and second one is working for BS6. No, BS6 to bring to the market, around 1 lakh crore has been spent. Refineries, they have spent 70,000 crores for making their retrofitting their factory refinery. And the manufacturer, they have also spent around 30,000 crores. So total put together, 1 lakh crores has been spent. Other side, the EVs are there. And EVs, huge subsidies are being given by the government. How long they can continue when this, not only the initial cost, at the same time, today also we don't know what would be the disposal mechanism for this lithium battery also, whether that can create environment again polluted. And the second thing is that how do I generate the electricity? If it is being generated through the coal, then I'm using in the city for this. So all these things are there. And the third, our government, they are pushing for not only CNG and CBG. And as it, then third one is the LNG. LNG is the, with the long haul buses and the truck. People are talking about the truck. We tried for, you were asking the last questions that which one is supposed to come, highway first or supermall should come. I personally worked with Ashok Leyland more than 6 months, and we are about to set up LNG plant in their factory so that he can start doing all this thing. Everything was ready. Suddenly EV came, and we were ready to take it in 10 buses as a trial that is start in flying in the road, so people will be then attracted towards the LNG buses and all. There are huge savings were there. Everything was set up, but once the EV came, then they stopped manufacturing. They stopped working on that particular field. Now, what we have done for the long haul transportation for buses, we have IGL have purchased around 7 buses with the cylinder BS6, type 4 cylinder, which can ply even with the CNG also. It can ply more than 500 kilometer. So we have tied up with the Dehradun government transport department. Because of COVID, we couldn't launch this particular transport, this long haul buses. We are planning to start this thing also. So this will give over and above, without going into the LNG also, the 500 kilometer can be traveled by this type 4 cylinder also. Now, right. You see, then there should be some government policy that all the 4-5 sectors should not be working in one particular city. It will be creating the duplication in the infrastructure. And suppose ultimately the number of vehicles would be, though there is an increase, but it will be limited in that particular city, certain numbers would be there. So as a result, what would be my submission is that then there should be some policy, like China, they do have the different policy, LNG on particular city, then EV on the particular city, like that they have. So otherwise, what will happen? Everybody would be creating and all the 4-5 infrastructure in one particular city. Then there will be competition. Ultimately, someone will be die out. So that is one thing. Second thing is that as regard exclusivity is concerned, see, IGL, MGL, definitely they are operating more than 20-25 years. And we have a mature system with us. Customers, there are 4 sectors, industry, definitely they will look for the cheaper gas. And it is not yet, still the tariff is not yet finalized. What should be the tariff? And based on that, the revenue would be coming to the whosoever is having the network. So it is this is one thing. If I go for this transport sector, definitely there is a competition for EV, CNG, and all these things are there. But if you see that the balance sheet of any all sector, their balance sheet never gone down even after having this CNG 555 CNG station in Delhi. So everybody has got the pie. And the question is that now the competitor among the, today we are enjoying the exclusivity. I'm only selling the CNG, somebody else can come. But they would be compressing the gas in our station. So I'll be getting the compression charges. No. And the third thing is that the domestic customers probably they would not think of going to anyone else because the way we are giving the services to each and every customers, they are with us more than 20-25 years. Probably, I'm sure that they will continue with us only. Only thing is that definitely if there is any competitions, then to improve our efficiency, we have to come out with certain innovative ideas, promotional scheme. So all these things will be
Right.
working in
Okay.
that. Thank you very much.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Mr. Janan. I think now that everybody's touched upon EVs, maybe I'll have a last set of questions on EVs, and then we open also the
Just before
questions.
that, if you would allow me to give you the government's vision on LNG infrastructure coming up across India,
Yes,
so that
Mr. Madan.
the audience is aware of what's going on as far as creation of infrastructure pan-India is concerned. You know, the government has identified 4 expressways: Delhi-Mumbai, Mumbai-Chennai, Chennai-Kolkata, and Kolkata-Delhi. This is about 6,000 kilometers of, golden quadrilateral where the government intends creating LNG facilities. And they have already identified some 160 sites on both sides of the highways. And there, either IOC-led companies or GAIL-led companies or private companies would be allowed to set up these LNG facilities on the highways. And the plan is by end of 2022, all these 160 stations would be in place. And of course, anybody, even a private entrepreneur can think, if he thinks there is business, can set up a station anywhere else that he desires to. So therefore, there is a roadmap, a plan, and government's intention of creating LNG stations across India. And as you know, once you fill a LNG, say a truck, it can go up to 800 kilometers. So the idea is, going forward, every 200 kilometers, there'll be a station on each side of the highway. And then as the intensity grows and the number of trucks and vehicles plying on LNG increases, that will narrow on to 100 kilometers. So that's the roadmap for the next 2-3 years in place. And there are different entities who are supposed to be investing and working. Incidentally, the first station is already existing for last 2 years in Bhubaneswar. And the other one, which Mr. Vadla said, is coming up in Bhopal. But the other 160 would come up in the next 2 years or so. So I thought I'll brief the audience on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mathur, for that thing. So just on my last set of questions on EV and fuel cells, maybe I start with Mr. Aggarwal. So Mr. Aggarwal, since Tata Motors has this wide-ranging portfolio, you'd be able to share, I think, a good perspective on this. Are some of the thoughts that, NGV is probably a transitionary fuel and finally we're going to go to EV. Are some of these misplaced? Because we do see that certain segments are going to stay very much out of the EV domain the foreseeable future. For example, heavy trucks, for example, maybe to a large extent, personal vehicles, whereas, say, two-wheelers taking on more of EV and, say, taxis taking on more of EV. So, and the second part of the question is, do you also see NGV as being a pathway to finally get into fuel cell vehicles because the infrastructure that is set up would also be used for supply of hydrogen?
Yeah, Asim, thank you for this question. As an OEM, we feel that every fuel has its own place, whether it is a diesel fuel or we say about CNG or LNG or HCNG, although the draft regulation has been only published a few days back. Similarly would be about fuel cell. So I don't think that we will have one advantage over another. Each fuel will have its, and even petrol, like smaller petrol is there. We will find different level of participation of different fuel in different category of vehicles. And we as Tata Motors are committed that we will work on all the fuels and ensure we participate. And as the earlier speaker had spoken about, I think Mr. Jana spoke about, is
which city should have which fuel, I think that is something which will be the policy holders from the government which will decide. But from the end consumer point of view, we will not restrict ourselves from non-availability of any vehicle if there is a demand, and I would say demand, a regular demand, a continuous demand, which justifies the investment to take it ahead. Like LNG today, yes, we believe it is very good, but the demand is in a very small form. Somebody needs 2 vehicles, somebody needs 5 vehicles. An investment of a big amount cannot happen for those small numbers to be satisfied. And when I'm saying investment, I have to talk about the engines and the bigger size of engines. The smaller size of engines is being used on CNG, which is mainly for the city buses and for intermediate commercial vehicles. But if we are looking at participation of heavy commercial vehicles, the engine powers have to be 250 horsepower, 300 horsepower. So that development has to be done. No one in the country has that engine of that capacity available today. So, but over a period of time, things will emerge clear. And as they emerge, I think we will watch the scenario and put right investments at the right time so that we are there in the market to work for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Aggarwal. Last question to you, Dr. Thipse. Do you think also NGVs is paving the path for fuel cell vehicles in the future?
Yeah. So actually, as rightly said the previous speaker, definitely there is going to be different fuels for different categories of vehicles. And but one thing is sure that natural gas will continue to have its niche, especially for the public buses, public transportation buses, three-wheelers, taxis. They will continue to be dominated, especially in the cities, by natural gas. Coming to a fuel cell part, there are 2 aspects. One is the fuel cell which is powered by hydrogen, and second is a fuel cell which can be powered by even natural gas. So there is this SOFC technology, solid oxide fuel cell technology, which can directly run on natural gas. And that also is a subject of research, especially for various applications, not only automotive, but non-automotive applications also, such as, forklifts, tractors, earth-moving equipment. So those kind of applications will also open up. In fact, they are also going for natural gas. So I don't see natural gas in any way as a transition fuel, because in fact, there are a lot of new sectors opening up along with conventional sectors. And as somebody rightly said, EV is not going to be penetrating beyond two-wheeler, three-wheeler immediately, because there are a lot of operational issues to be sorted with EVs, especially when you go to segments like SUV, that is sports utility vehicle, where the power and all requirements are very high, along with heavy duty vehicles where the torque requirements are high. So those kind of segments, EV, I don't see immediate penetration. But yes, they will start getting into those sectors which are easily accessible, like two-wheeler and three-wheeler. Then coming to the second part is regarding hydrogen, there was a comment. See, hydrogen, definitely it is not going to come tomorrow. Nobody is saying that. But thing is that we have to start working on it today. And maybe the first step which we did was the blending of CNG with hydrogen. And if I recall, IOC had developed a remarkable technology. Dr. Malhotra is here. That we had, they had produced the hydrogen from CNG itself and blended it back. And now they are successfully running a pilot project in Delhi under the supervision of Supreme to run some pilot buses on hydrogen CNG. And second thing which the government has done is to also notify hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, which is also going to be a revolutionary vehicle in the long run. So as it's a zero carbon vehicle, so definitely these technologies are required. And the rules for that also have to be framed today itself. So we can't just ignore it, because the whole world is working. We should also get into that. But definitely, point taken that it is going to take time, because there are a lot of safety concerns, and definitely so the focus is on natural gas, no doubt about it.
All right, thank you, thank you. I think Mr. Vajba wanted to make a small observation on the roadmap that Mr. Mathur had spoken about. So, Mr. Vadla, if you could add that, and after that, I'll go on to the audience questions.
Yeah, thanks, Ashim. I'll not take more than 60 seconds. So, Mr. Mathur spoke about 160 LNG dispensing stations being added. Mr. Aggarwal from Tata Motors says we are not ready to give you the LNG vehicles because business is not there. So the responsibility falls on the shoulders of Dr. Thipse now to quickly allow conversions of the existing vehicles. That because that is the only way that the viability of this chain will be established. Otherwise, it will still again remain that chicken and egg kind of a thing. This is the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vadla. And,
Maybe can
that
I
was,
respond, sir? Maybe I just want to respond here. That
yes,
government is
yes.
already making the rules for this kind of conversion. Only one bottleneck is there, which I want to say that for BS6 and beyond, there is a debate on regarding the retrofitment, whether it will be allowed or not, because there are a lot of issues raised by various stakeholders regarding the complicated nature of vehicle electronics and the requirements of OBD, RD, and so many new things which have come post BS6. And that is very challenging. So whether a retrofitted vehicle can take up that activity, and secondly, who will take responsibility of the vehicle after retrofitment? Will it be the OEM or the retrofitter? Or the extended in-service emission compliance, well, after 3 years. So those kind of questions are popping up. So there is a lot of debate going on at ministry level. Several committees are working on this, and so the guidelines are taking time. But on the as far as the OEM testing is concerned, we are very much there. In fact, we have already certified one or two LNG vehicles. That is not a problem. And I don't see any bottleneck as far as the certification of OEM vehicles is concerned. Retrofitment, yes, there is some delay, but we are working on it, and hopefully we should help to resolve all pending issues and even allow the certification of retrofitted and converted vehicles. So that is very much on the agenda.
Right. Thank you, Vadva and Dr. Thipse. In fact, the first question from the audience is also on that, and I'll probably put it to Dr. Malhotra, since he also talked about some imperatives for improving NGV growth in the country. He says, can the government also take some measures to simplify and this retrofitment conversion so that it becomes easier for more participants to come in? And as Dr. Thipse said, on the technical side, things are being done, but there's a whole administrative side to it also. So, Dr. Malhotra, that's the question to you. It's come from the audience.
Actually, retrofitment will depend upon the interest being taken by the OEMs, whether they will be supporting that. Because in the past, CNG retrofitment also started initially, but there was a lot of opposition from the OEMs who said that they will not guarantee their vehicles and who will give warranty. And then each and every retrofitment kit has to undergo the testing at ARAI or other agencies. So it is not an easy task, but certainly can be considered if it is viable. Obviously, I am not from auto company side, so maybe auto manufacturers or auto component manufacturers will have to see that, and maybe Dr. Thipse's institute can comment better on that. So it's not really the question to me. I think it should be posed to Dr. Thipse or to Mr. Or Tata Motors or others. One thing before Ashim, if you permit me, I just want to make one comment about the electric vehicles also, which you talked. In fact, one of the policy which the Niti Aayog has been pushing very hard, and the government also, is about the incentives on electric vehicles. Mr. Jana also said that a lot of incentives being given to electric vehicles, and natural gas not under GST. So it's a lot of disincentive. So the natural gas industry is at a great disadvantage at this point of time. So I think that needs to be corrected. Why I'm saying so is that electric vehicles are being pushed from 2 points. One is from the energy security point of view. The government feels that they will have energy security, and second is from environmental point of view. Now, first commenting about energy security is that the electric vehicles, if you are using from environmental point of view, let me say first that if you are using the coal-based generation of power, you have, and then you use it in electric vehicles, you are just shifting the source of pollution. And greenhouse gas emissions are much more in case of the coal-generated power, and that used in electricity. Why I said so was that the batteries also are having materials which are imported. So I think it makes a strong case that government should have correct policies, not inclined towards EVs. If they want absolutely clean air, then maybe hydrogen fuel cells vehicles or fuel cell vehicles, as Tipsy said, I also initially said that it can piggyback on, the natural gas infrastructure. Why I said so was, Tipse said that SOFC kind of, systems to generate electricity in a distributed manner can be set up based on natural gas, so that you can have that electricity and use it, rather than using coal-based power. And then you can also have natural gas reformers, which can produce hydrogen and you can use it in fuel cell vehicles. Ultimately, somebody said that maybe the fuel cell vehicles are far off. Let me tell you, the Toyota's hydrogen boss has said by 2025, their fuel cell vehicles will be as cheap as hybrid vehicles of today. So it's not far off. And being a researcher, I know the speed of innovation is very fast. So natural gas can be a great enabler. The kind of infrastructure we are building in this country can be a great enabler for moving towards fuel cell vehicles. In fact, the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, I was just looking at I took out my diary when this debate started. The IC engines have an efficiency of 25 to 30%. The fuel cells have around 60% efficiency. And then energy at wheels is about more than 55% or so in fuel cell vehicle, while it is about 20% energy available at wheels in case of an internal combustion engine. So if we are talking about energy security, we are a net importer of energy. I think we should move towards the fuel cell vehicles in due course of time to have total energy security for this country, and natural gas can be a great enabler for moving towards hydrogen fuel cell vehicles in this country, and that should be preferred over the battery electric vehicles, for which the batteries will have to depend on lithium and cobalt, which is entirely cornered by China at this point of time. If we are talking of Atmanirbhar Bharat, energy security, clean air, I think that's the correct method of going through LNG route or a natural gas route, and then moving towards the hydrogen. So I thought I will make a brief comment before you close.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Malhotra. I think there's one more question that's come from the audiences. Will you be considering LNG as a fuel for marine market in India as well? And what is the technology readiness for that? So maybe Dr. Tipse, you could respond to that. And maybe also Mr. Vadla, you could say if there are any plans to supply it to the marine sector also.
LNG has already been considered for marine sector. In fact, they were the Inland Waterways Authority of India, IWAI, were considering LNG barges. So that activity was initiated. I'm not sure what is the current status, but yes, very much so. LNG is also being discussed for the water sector, marine sector. And only one bottleneck there is no certification agency for marine, because these bore engines which use that LNG, there is no certification.
So Tipse, you don't need.
Yeah.
Dr. Tipse, you don't need domestic agencies, because these are all big shipbuilders, engine manufacturers. After the IMO regulations have come in place, IMO regulations which talk about extremely low sulfur fuel to be used or scrubbers to be used, LNG for marine applications has come in a big way. I think that is, and the certification will be done globally. You don't have to worry. ARI cannot be the certifying agency for the shipboard engines.
No, we are not. We are not. I'm only saying that there is no this.
No, globally there are agencies available. They are being used LNG for shipboard engines.
Okay.
Sure, Ashim. So if I may add here, point very well said. Very briefly, the marine side can be trifurcated. So there is the high seas where the vehicles are operating, say, inter-country. Then there is the coastal trade, and third is the trade in the river. So all of them are getting a lot of attention, as both Dr. Malhotra and Dr. Tipse said. And especially in India, the National Waterways One, that has been the primary attention for the government for a variety of reasons. One, there is a sufficient draft availability for the vessels to run in there, because whatever you may say, when LNG dispensing has to be established along the river, so there has to be a sufficient trade throughout the year. So that kind of activity has been gaining ground. To test this again from Petronet example, so one fishing trawler, it has been sort of awarded for conversion to LNG, and I think we should see that it will see the light of the day in the next couple of months or so, and we will actually be then up and going. But yes, a lot of attention because IMO regulations on the sulfur emissions, and LNG will become a choice of fuel even for the marine sector.
All right, thank you, thank you. With that, I think we've had an excellent perspective come in, whether it's from the availability side, pricing side, vehicle side, alternate fuels versus natural gas. I think the audience has really benefited from the August panel that's here and the kind of perspectives that they have shared. With that, I would like to conclude the panel and hand over to Nirja to take the proceedings further.
Well, this was indeed a very well-rounded session. We discussed the supply side, the pricing, the infrastructure, the pipeline connectivity. We talked about the corridors, application and vehicle adaptation to this new fuel market, the market strategies. So we realized that there's a whole economics which is supported by a conducive infrastructure and policies will propel the growth for a new clean green fuel market. With this, I would like to thank all our speakers, Rajiv Mathurji, A.K. Janaji, Mr. Joshi, Mr. Aggarwal, Dr. Malhotra, Mr. Vadla, and Dr. Thipse. Of course, my special thanks to our moderator for the day, Asim, for so wonderfully moderating it. Thanking all the delegates who took out time to be with us today. Indeed, you were very important in making today's event successful. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
your time.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.